I have an amazing selection of panelists with me today that I'm really excited to find out a little bit more about what they're doing in their markets and what they're doing to really make impact in the financial literacy space. So I'll just do a really high level introduction and then I'll hand over to my panelists to give a bit more detail into what they do and what their organisation does. So with me is Dr. Pushpa Wood, who is the Director at the Financial Education and Research Centre at Massey University in New Zealand. I have Albert Christian Go, who is the COO of Beam & Go, and Audrey Jo Tan, who is the co-founder and chief dreams architect of Play Moola. So Pushpa, I might start with you to do a really, just introduce yourself in a bit more detail and let us know what you do and the work that you do.
Namaste. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings from what we call the land of white clouds, New Zealand. I have been involved with financial capability, as we now call it in New Zealand, for longer than I care to remember. It has, I guess, my relationship with money and working with money started at a very young age. When I was mentored by my father into his union movement, and we used to have people coming in almost every day needing some help, and that's where it started. So when I transferred to shifted to New Zealand, I kept my hand in, but more, shall we say, formally, I've been involved in the last 15-20 years as a financial capability. So I am at the moment head of, or director of, depends what you call it, of Financial Education and Research Centre at Massey University. So short form is FinEd Centre. And it has three clear areas that it gets involved in: research and consultancy, education programs, and professional development and training. So I leave it at that at this point in time in terms of my introduction, but happy to answer any particular questions.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Pushpa. Albert?
Hello, everyone. I'm Albert Go. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Beam & Go. We're actually a social impact digital marketplace and financial inclusion fintech that helps Filipino migrant workers so that they become more empowered, so that they can reach their families' goals in life. And yeah, I was once a Filipino migrant worker where I used to live in Singapore for about 4.5 years, from 2011 to 2015. And just like many Filipinos, because of the absence of work opportunities and and seeking of like bigger aspirations in life, we're all willing to leave our families so that we can support our loved ones, and that became one of the catapults for us to start Beam & Go. I myself saw it. My co-founder John also comes from Filipino heritage, and when we started Beam & Go, our main focus is, when we just look at the numbers, Philippines is number 4 in the world today in remittances, $30 billion each year, which constitutes 10 to 12% of our GDP. And if you look at it, why is there still immense poverty in the Philippines with so much cash sent to the Philippines? Then we ask ourselves the question, maybe it's not about the problem of not having cash, but the problem is that people do not know how to make the money grow and work for them. And that is our main goal. We started with a marketplace where we're addressing the primary needs of the Filipino migrant worker with our e-vouchers at supermarkets, pharmacies, catering to their families' basic needs. It became very popular, but then 4 or 5 years after, we realized that it's not enough for us to impact the migrant worker on a holistic level. We're just helping them at the tip of the iceberg. So that's why Beam & Go now is at the crux of that journey for us to be able to offer more innovative and empathetic way of doing financial literacy, which I hope to be able to explain to our audience today. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks very much, Albert. And Audrey.
Thanks, Anna. Hello, everybody. I'm Audrey Joy. I'm from Singapore. And my journey with financial literacy resilience started about almost 10 years ago as part of the global financial crisis when I was actually based in San Francisco. And that really shook me as a young person, learning that there was so much about money that we as young people didn't really know and didn't really understand, especially with the challenging financial situation in the financial system that we had at that time. And so with Play Mula, it was a response out of the crisis that we found as young people to really see what we could do to impart these good habits and what we call financial emotional resilience also to the next generation. And so our work entails working with families, with young people and young adults and preparing them for the workforce. We work today with educational institutions, also with financial institutions and with the communities here locally in Singapore as well.
Thanks, Audrey. And I think something that's already come up, which is quite interesting, is how financial literacy has a number of different parts to it. You know, we've already spoken about resilience and capability as well. And I would like to start the conversation off actually, Pushpa, by asking you around this terminology to do with financial capability rather than financial literacy, and what that shift in the language really means to you. And then I'll hand over to the other panelists as well to just discuss what financial literacy means, particularly in the context of our respective markets.
It's quite interesting. I've been tracking, in my personal language, I usually use the term managing your money to best possible way for your advantage. All right. So I don't usually use, in my work, I don't usually use jargon like financial literacy or capability or resilience, because to me, at the core of it is how do you actually manage your money in a way that it actually meets your needs, and it is possible for you to actually use money which is most suitable for your personal circumstances. So what money management means to somebody who's a millionaire is a very different approach to somebody who's only got sufficient to survive. Hence this. But having tracking, being a sort of a back of my mind, being a researcher, I've been tracking where did we actually start? Where did the terms actually start? We started with financial education, believe it or not. And then we moved to financial literacy. And then there was a term used about four years ago, financial capability, because it was felt that literacy provides you knowledge and skills, but does not necessarily take you a step further where you can actually apply that knowledge and skills to best possible way, which is suitable for your circumstances. In New Zealand, we are now also talking about financial well-being. In fact, ANZ did a survey 3 years ago, and the next one is due to be out this year, is financial well-being. And that is taking, again, one step further. Yes, you have a knowledge, yes, you have a skills, and yes, you are applying to some extent or full extent, but is it really contributing to your overall financial well-being? All right. And that's where the team is. So we have actually last month in New Zealand launched our national strategy for financial capability. And in that, it has been made very clear. And we have used three different terminology when it comes to money, right? And that has been recognized in our national strategy. And we've got three goals. One is consistent content, to make sure that we are all talking about a similar terminology and consistently the same terminology. Working together, that's the collaboration to minimize duplication and waste of resources, and demystify money. And that's where my passion actually lies, to demystify money. Because at the moment, for young people especially anybody who's age of 5 over, between say 5 and 10, majority of them haven't even seen money, what it actually looks like. They wouldn't know in New Zealand what $50 or $100 note looks like. We're lucky if they know what $5 or $10 note looks like. And that's my biggest concern, is that they have lost that relationship with money, which I grew up with. Right? So for them, the money is a machine at the wall or a plastic card. Right? So their attachment to money is no longer there, which presents a challenge for those of us who are working with young people.
That is such an interesting point, that it's one of those things where you don't even necessarily realize until you properly think about how a young kid now would be thinking about money compared to us as kids or a previous generation. And even the idea of what a note looks like and actually understanding what money feels like and how to spend that. I really like that idea about demystifying money. And I might hand over to you, Audrey, to expand on what you feel financial literacy relates to, because I know with your work, there's a lot going into some of these mentalities and thinking about money and what it means as well.
Thanks, Anna. So for us, very similar with Dr. Pushpa, we left the term financial literacy behind a little while ago. And we began to ask ourselves what's most relevant for young people in this time. And that was where the reframing started to happen, where we saw the outcome of financial emotional resilience as a pathway to a flourishing life. Because a lot of times we ask ourselves, what is the point in learning about money? What is the point in learning about how to manage your money? So the key thing that we've begun as an organization to help people reframe is that if you can begin to understand the different dimensions of capital. So we take a lot of inspiration from the 8 forms of capital from permaculture, that financial capital is really just one form of capital. You have spiritual, intellectual, experiential, living, cultural capital. And when you begin to reframe the different forms of wealth, then what this aspect of the flourishing life becomes something a lot more meaningful, as opposed to it being isolated as one form of capital. So when we think about financial emotional resilience, it's really about understanding the role of our emotions, also identifying the daily practices and actions that we can take, and that it's modifiable. A lot of the money narratives we have, for instance, money is evil, rich people are evil. And some of these slightly negative narratives sometimes may not serve us, but there is these opportunities to reframe the money narratives, as well as to reframe the emotions and the daily practices. Because a lot of times we find also in our work, there was a recent study by BlackRock, and they found that almost 53% of Singaporean millennials see that money is a big source of stress. And we think about the emotional aspects of money. I feel guilty when I impulse spend. I avoid thinking about money because I don't want to think about money. So it's about also addressing these emotional aspects of money that permeate into our life and putting them in its ordered place.
So interesting, thinking about the definition of wealth, even unpacking what does wealth look like in different cultural contexts beyond just money. How do all these factors tie in together? So I think it's going to be interesting learning a little bit more about what your approach is as well. And I think, Albert, from your perspective, where you're working on digital and e-wallets and technology, how would you say financial literacy is defined in your market as well, and why do you feel it's important?
Yeah, I think in general, the Philippines, they're saying that the Philippines is like a culture where people are living from paycheck to paycheck. Financial literacy hasn't really been taught well in the education system, and that's why people are not knowledgeable. They don't really have a clear path and direction on how they can make money grow for them. And having said so, if you look at all the statistics, the financial inclusion or access to banking system. It's very low in the Philippines, even though I think this whole great reset and COVID pandemic has accelerated the use of mobile wallets and e-wallets, which is a step in the right direction. But I would say that we're still far behind and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And I would say we're still at that elementary or grade school level, and we need to move up in terms of the level of understanding, let's say, how Singaporeans think about making money grow for them. We're still very far away from that. So first of all, I would say majority of the migrant workers are really not from high income families, because if they're from higher income, well-educated families, they wouldn't even want to leave the Philippines. So the mere fact that they decided to leave the Philippines or their motherland is already a testament that they have clear aspirations to improve their quality in life. And that's why many of them have no other recourse but to take that leap of faith. So I would say, like, and we try to not use these technical jargons because it's very intimidating to the average Filipino, Filipina. So in layman's terms, I would say that financial literacy for us is being able to walk through the various stages of the migrant worker's life the moment that they step foot, let's say in Singapore, let's say from mostly low income level to and poor financial capability, that state of not knowing how to make the money work for them, to middle income, but has the tools to make good financial decisions, to build sustainable wealth, and to foster deep family relationships. So that's where the stage that we're in, and we're hoping to be able to use innovative user interface and experience so that we're able to speak to them at the language that they feel that they're comfortable with, and to be able to introduce learnings integrated to our product in a non-intimidating way. So that's how I would explain how we do financial literacy. Because when you teach the Filipino migrant worker, you have to do it in small chunks. And you need to be able to tell it in a story that they would understand. Because for them, they usually use, or they usually adopt products based on what they hear from friends, as opposed to what they really read from what, let's say, the financial services companies have been showing them. So that's how I would explain it. I hope I was clear enough for everybody.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the role of innovation is something that we're speaking about more and more, particularly in markets where technology and digital are really helping increase accessibility. And Albert, I might stay on you on this topic of your approach to financial literacy. You mentioned, the role of recommendations. And I think that's something that in RFI group research, we see that particularly younger people really rely on recommendations from friends and family, as do people who aren't financially confident or wouldn't rate themselves as high on a financial confidence scale. So for your organization, is there a particular demographic that you're focusing on, or is your approach particularly successful with a certain demographic, would you say, or is it sort of a holistic or widespread approach?
We did conduct a research, and it was fairly recent, and we tried to shape the way we conduct or we implement new products and services in Beam and Go. And months ago, we did a research. The methodology is composed of both the qualitative research through we have about 10,000 users, but based on the sample size, we were able to get about 100 people respond to it. We also did a focus group discussion, 2 sessions of that with 12 people. And it's very apparent that a lot of the Filipinos, they really get very intimidated with the mobile wallets and the financial services products that are available to them. And I'm speaking on behalf of these Filipino migrant workers, mostly from, these are the domestic helpers. I understand that a lot of the migrant workers coming from the Philippines and Singapore are also occupying higher income jobs. But for us,
We might have just lost you there, Albert.
Yeah. Be frozen. I think Albert is frozen there. Hmm. Can I pick up one thing, Anna, on that? You were
experience of belongingness. Can everybody hear me now?
We can, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Where did I get lost? Sorry.
We were talking about migrant workers with domestic help.
Okay.
Background.
So in that study, we asked them about the factors for them to like for mobile wallets, adoption of mobile wallets, and a few things came up in that study. One very important aspect is the what we call it the adoption, the sense of belongingness, that they would use products that their friends would recommend to them, and that's more than 50% of them. They wouldn't read, but they would rather ask a friend, what remittance center should I be using when I send money to my family? Or the second is, what bank should I use? Let's say a UOB or POSB, DBS. So rather than looking at the different websites, they would just hear from friends, and based on the recommendations from friends, then they would use that product. For them, it's like they would trust a product or a brand that their friends would recommend to them. On our end, what we're seeing is that the intimidation that they're experiencing now is because a lot of technical terms are being bombarded to them. It's like when they go out, all they see are different ads, and how do we really break through that clutter and speak to them at the most basic level? First is, for them, while accessibility is so important, but you need to be able to explain to them why accessibility is important to them, because like what I mentioned, for them, they already left the Philippines. That's leaving their family. So is it really the root of the problem? They don't mind going to Lucky Plaza and asking a teller that, my money hasn't been received yet, but in a mobile app, am I comfortable talking to a Singaporean telling me like this is your remittance, this is the remittance number, but they want to feel that care and trust. So in a way, in our end, most of our employees are coming from Filipino heritage and Filipino roots. That's one. The way we communicate, everything from the application process to customer service, every little detail in our site, we make it very simple and friendly. We try to avoid using jargon so that they feel at home with us. So those are some of the things that we learned. And in the future, we're also thinking about, a lot of them are very myopic, Anna, and they only see the smallest aspect of, I just want food for my family. That's it. But they're unable to see the bigger picture. It's like, how do we really open up? And that's where we're going to introduce goal setting features and even calculators to make it more interactive to them. It's in the works, and it's all backed by study.
Fantastic. And it must have been really exciting to see some of that firsthand research as well, from customers talking about, or from users talking about what's important to them. Pushpa, you had something to add to this?
I am actually in a dilemma. My fire alarm has just gone off.
Oh no.
So I'll just need to go and investigate and come back to you on
We'll
that
come back to
one.
you.
But yes, I do have something to say. I'll come back
We'll hold
shortly.
that thought. Yep.
Okay, please.
All right, Audrey, I might hand over to you then. Essentially just looking at your approach and whether that's targeting a particular demographic, or if there's a particular segment of the market you're really looking to focus in on, or if it's more widespread.
Got you. So for us, our work is mostly focused on families, so working with children, youth, and also in recent times with young people, so preparing young people to enter into the workforce. And so our approach is, so we have a pathway. We say it's a pathway towards a flourishing life, hopefully a step closer to what an individual may define as flourishing. And we realize that, you know, this definition differs from every family to every person, and it's unique. And so for us, we begin with the process of inspiring young people and families through storytelling, because we've realized also that a lot of the money narratives that we've inherited have been also from our grandparents, our parents, our family, and those actually shape our own relationship with money. And so Suhail, who's a futurist in the space, he talks about in the causal layered analysis, he talks about how in order for societies to have systematic behavioral change or systems change, a lot of the times is looking at the myth and metaphor layers. So that's really in understanding, you know, our fundamental beliefs or our limiting beliefs for that matter, to begin to reshape, you know, some of these limiting beliefs into positive ones, and then having the interventions of like goals. So goals are where the content and the curriculum actually comes in that are personalized. Because you could, for instance, be someone who's struggling with hoarding, and you realize that, you know, it's kind of embedded in your security challenges that you may face or your self-worth. And so how do you then tackle this issue or this challenge of hoarding by serving the right kind of personalized content curriculum? And in recent times also, we've also been working with a lot of coaches, therapists, and counselors to provide one-on-one personalized recommendation to individuals who realize that, okay, if there are certain traumas around money that they may want to address in their family, and then we've seen the stresses around money for families as well, this is an area that really can help and enable families.
Yeah, I think unpacking some, or looking at what some of these underlying factors are that influence our feelings about money, particularly family, I think is really important. And I saw in some of your research the importance of healthy money conversations. And I think that's something that, you know, you might overlook if you've come from a family where money was really, you know, open and it was easy to talk about and there was stability. But I imagine in different contexts, different cultures, different families, everyone would have such different you know, histories of how they feel about money and how they teach their children about money. So I think there's a lot of really important work going on, it sounds like, going on behind the scenes with your organization to really think about what does money mean to individuals, but also what's informing that. You know, I think it's really exciting and really important, I think, to have those expert opinions as well. Pushpa, welcome back.
I can, and that I've got 3 pieces of work that we have done that I can share with you. One is
Definitely.
our landmark longitudinal study that we started in 2012, and we started with 18 to 24-year-olds, and they confirmed at that time. We've gone back to them 3 times now, 4 times. And it is interesting to note that parents still remain their first port of call when it comes to advice about money, right? Hence, I have been pushing that for a number of years to say, if this is where the young people are going, what are we doing to actually educate parents about money management skills? Because if parents' skills are poor, because my biggest worry is, let's say we have one set of parents whose financial capability skills are poor. They're bringing up a generation who is also not learning, and then they will be ready in next 10 years' time to bring a 3rd generation. So it can easily be transferred into a generational gap. So we've been working on that. All of our work is, if we run courses, education courses, that informs our research. If we do research and we have findings, that informs our courses. So it's a kind of a 2-way process. The second piece of work we did was about 3.5 years ago, was looking at cultural perceptions of money. So if you know anything about New Zealand, Maori and Pacifica culture specifically, and also followed by Asian cultures, we don't tend to think about money in individual terms. We tend to think about money in collective terms, right? So it's not I am rich, it's the family is rich. And there is a difference between thinking how are your money skills as opposed to how's the family's money skills, right? The third piece of work we did a few years ago was looking at the spending habits of Maori women. We specifically were working in there. It was quite interesting. I think it was more eye-opening for participants who took part in it than it was for researchers, is that they realized that it is not an issue of whether they had enough money or not. The issue was how they were using the money that they had, right? So it's the issue. But the underlying fact still is, regardless of whether you're in Philippines, Singapore, or New Zealand, or any other country, in order for person to manage their money, they need to have sufficient money in the first place to meet all of their needs, right? I remember one wise, very wise man said years and years and years ago that it is absolutely criminal to try and teach poor people to manage their money better. If anybody who knows how to manage their money better, it's the poor people, because they have to. Yes, they don't use the jargon that we guys use, but they do have that skill set. What they are not equipped for is to cope with the new language, and especially the new gobbledygook that is coming through. They are not equipped to actually decipher the complicated financial world that is actually facing them. And the third thing, they're not necessarily equipped with the ever changing digital world that is coming in front of them. Right. That's where we need to actually provide the support and knowledge and help. There's no point telling or teaching them how to manage their money if they do not actually have equal access to those resources, those tools, and understanding of those tools and resources. And that's where the biggest challenge is. How do you find the balance between what they need to learn, what they have to learn, what they want to learn? And
Really,
that's where our biggest challenge is at the moment. So we at FinEd Center, our research continually informs our work. And one of the area we have taken, which is none of the others have mentioned, is our focus has been on professionalizing the workforce, because considerable amount of investment around the world has been made in service provision, right? And budget advice and digital tools. And are we actually also investing in people enough, in people who are actually providing these services? Do we have a quality of training and professional development for those people who are actually delivering with this budgeting advice, whether it is financial advice, and different countries are using different things? So we have 6 years ago, we made a conscious decision to actually focus on workforce development. And as a result, next month, actually, we are launching a brand new microcredit for that purpose, is to make sure that there is something there for the professionals who are actually working in the area. I've looked around the world, there isn't very much around. There's sufficient for how to actually, the providing advice, providing services, providing tools, but not for people who are actually doing the providing.
I think that's such a great point, and one that I haven't personally come across when thinking about addressing the needs of people who are looking for financial advice or are receiving financial advice or accessing tools or personal financial management tools, investing in the people who are providing that service. It seems so obvious, but I think it's a really unique perspective on something that could actually help facilitate quite meaningful change. And I think that actually ties in with my next question, which was around what are the segments in society that are being overlooked and may need the most assistance when it comes to financial literacy education? And Pushpa, I think you've actually addressed that in a slightly different way, which is thinking about, while we want to address the needs of people who could really benefit from these types of tools, you've got to make sure the people providing the tools understand the complexities and the what happens behind the scenes to actually lead to people accessing these tools. And Audrey, I'd love to ask this question to you as well when thinking about the segments of society that maybe are being overlooked or could really benefit the most from financial literacy education.
Very cool. For us as well, just to touch a little bit on what Dr. Pushpa said, we spent the early parts of our years in the journey educating children and youth, but very quickly realized also that supporting parents and walking and being with parents was also a very, very big part of the interventions. So in fact, I was sharing with Mariko when we were speaking sometime last week that one of the interventions that we've begun designing for is a parent and child intervention. And so we work, to answer your question about the gaps as well, we work with the family service centers here locally in Singapore, where we take care of some of the marginalized communities. And, we have communities coming us to say, okay, what can you do for the young people and the youths? And then we say, we realize that the most systematic impact that could happen for the families as a whole is to bring in the parents into the conversations as well. So part of the intervention that we've designed for is actually bringing, hopefully, both parents, husband and wife, into the conversation. So we call it like our mula, having families actually have conversations around money, but also working through some of these limiting money narratives. And also, as what Dr. Pushpa said, working through exactly the right kinds of areas of skills, knowledge, and behaviors that they would like to work on. So a lot of times you realize that interventions are very top down, but at the end of the day, what a flourishing life is for you and for another family will be so different. It could mean, having enough money to put my child and my family through school. And so we realize that that's one of the things that we've recently been called to do, to take a more intentional approach to designing for such interventions. So that's one. The second thing that I would say as a gap that we found, we recently also did a study with young people in Singapore, and coupled with the pandemic and the situation with lockdowns happening around the world, we see that mental health has been one of the biggest challenges that we face as a society, whether we're in Singapore, in New Zealand, in the US, in the UK. So this is really one of the other gaps that we've identified. And because money is such a big source of stress and emotional anxiety for not only young people, but for adults and parents. So one of the things that we did recently as well with a group of low-income communities of young people, we realized that the kind of emotional overheads that our young people were struggling with is dealing with issues like, mom and dad has lost their jobs and getting displaced because of the pandemic. So there is really now a mental overhead and a burden for the young person to really absorb what's happening in the family, but also be equipped with themselves to really dream and also hopefully take a step closer to even pivoting, their own careers or their own ways of being supportive in the families. So we realized that this emotional health and emotional and mental well-being is really a really, really big part of a gap that we've identified as part of the larger, financial well-being ecosystem.
See, one of my dream is, Anna, if it is realized before I leave this world, is to actually have a financial health check of all the workforce around the world that is involved in providing these services. We make assumptions that just because we've given them a on-the-job training to do a job, that their financial health is okay. We do not know. We've not done that, and that's one of the things I'm going to embark on in New Zealand, is to look at the financial health of our financial mentors, which is a network, large network here. I would love to do that, but I think the other piece of work we did, and we haven't actually talked about it today, is the pandemic has actually created an entirely new group of vulnerable people, right? We haven't paid very much attention to that. And for that, I mean, is in New Zealand circumstances, for example, we have people on benefit, all right? They were on benefit before pandemic, they were on benefit during the pandemic, and they will still remain on benefit after the pandemic. So for them, n- nothing much has changed in terms of their financial health. In fact, there's additional support has been put in place. And I'm speaking from my country. Yes, it's not enough by any means, but at least it's there. Then we have people who have been on 150K plus salary, who never ever had to actually plan. They never had to source any of the social services. They lived for now, and their emergency funds might be close to zero. And they are the people who are actually are not sure about how to even access the support network, let alone having actually a mentality to access the support network. And that group is a larger group than those who are actually receiving benefits. And yet, we are still sort of thinking about that group, because this group requires minimum support to actually take them out of that at-risk category. Otherwise, they are very much at risk if we do not do something about it, if we do not work with them. But one thing, regardless of who we interviewed, one thing has become very clear is they have accepted the fact of need for saving for emergencies. So that's the positive thing has come out of it, is that those we were trying to convince, we no longer hopefully will have to convince that, guys, you really need to take charge of this, and you really need to start thinking about saving for emergencies. Forget about retirement, but saving for emergencies first.
Absolutely agree with that. And that's something we actually saw in our own research at RFI Group as well, when looking at savings goals over time, where it used to be, more of a car or holiday. Holiday clearly was no longer a savings goal, but this emergency funds was such a big thing that came out of last year, when you're exactly right, this new group of people who have always worked and suddenly aren't working, and they've never had to have this buffer. And now they're faced with the fact that, oh gosh, what do I even spend each week? I'm just used to it all working out. And I think that's something that Vanita has been doing some work on as well. I know this new group of people who are really struggling financially. And I think that's something that there's probably going to be a lot of work that's required to really figure out how to best support these people. And I like that idea about thinking within the workplace, how do you make sure people are empowered to make the right, or make financial decisions, or understand their money better, or very simply start having a bit of a savings buffer? Because I think even in the US, in Australia, New Zealand, the research is showing that people just don't have enough for a rainy day if something does happen. So hopefully that's one of the maybe positives, if I can say that, for the pandemic, where people are learning the value of that rainy day fund. Albert, I might hand over to you. Have you had any extra comments to add on anything we've been discussing here?
Yeah, I would say a lot of the educators or the trainings that are made available to the Filipino migrant workers are very theoretical in nature. Before the pandemic, they were just organizing all these classes, not understanding the level that they're at. It's like you cannot come up with a training program for a primary 3 level when there's still a primary 1. And that's where the gap is. And that's why, number one, few people attend these trainings. And secondly, if they do attend, they probably would hardly pick up the main essence of it. And I see that as one of the biggest challenges. And that's why in Beam and Go, what we've done throughout is like what separates us from other, let's say, e-commerce or fintechs out there is that we've adopted a very empathy or community-driven approach to our products and services. And we really start that by building a community. We do have like groups and we've pumped it up like the past few weeks when we were reimagining how we should be communicating with our customers. Is we started all these WhatsApp groups, and we would label it like, in Tagalog, it's called Wais sa Singapore, which literally, if you translate it in English, it means the wise Filipina in Singapore. And we would talk about like day-to-day aspects to, where is the cheapest chicken rice in Orchard, or where you live in Bukit Batok, or Kembangan or wherever they're living. Where can I buy the cheapest chocolate? Is it Mustafa or is it in somewhere like Dollar Singapore, or we'll talk about like customers that can share their success stories on how they were able to start their sari store or a mom and pop shop in the Philippines, and they're making money grow for them. So it appeals to the typical Filipina in Singapore, and that's why we're getting a lot more people join these groups. But when you communicate to them, it's not just about offering products and services, it's being able to really talk to them and not be a robot to them. So that's why we've done that. Like we have like live programs that we used to do every week in Beam and Go, and we do it in even before the pandemic. We have these like live sessions, and sometimes the program it doesn't it's not too formal when you do the programs, because you need to allow them to comment and ask and talk to you in a normal way, so that they don't feel that they're asking a stupid or not so intelligent question, because any question could be good, but they're afraid to ask the question if you come across as like a professor that's that can be intimidating to them. And we've done that, like, and we continue to do that. In fact, by the end of this month, because we just launched a mobile wallet and in pilot stage, and we're getting more than about 200 of users. We're actually launching this Beam and Go Academy to them that can basically they're free to ask any questions about Beam and Go and how Beam and Go really can help them shape their future and help them in the littlest ways to save on time that they would go to a remittance center, but that time can be spent for them to build their relationships with their families. And probably a lot of you would know, like, a lot of these helpers are coming from estranged families, and maybe all of them, based on our interview, have children, and it's so hard for them to know that their children are growing up and they aren't there, the mother isn't there. So these are aspects to our training. The financial wellness is a huge part of it. And I think that's where all the problems would lie if they don't know how to handle with their money. But then the other aspects of their being a parent is also taken into account in our Beam and Go Academy. So I hope I was able to explain some of the, I guess, the gaps in how our approach to it is really different.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that actually leads on to maybe one of my next questions, just thinking about, I guess, the next steps and the role of digital. And I might go back to you, Albert, when thinking about financial literacy and how it can be helped or hindered by digital literacy and digital inclusion. And, in your space with innovation and this new wallet, how do you feel digital plays a role in financial, capability or wellness or literacy, or, whatever we're really thinking about here in terms of just financial inclusion?
I would say we're at the crux of it. We're at the tipping point where the adoption to mobile wallets is really going to blow up, and before, the factors that hindered it is because of poor access to internet technology. A lot of the provincial side, where most of these Filipino migrant workers reside in, let's say they live in a valley or some town far away from the main city, they really had problems accessing internet. And now, because of like improvement in internet connectivity, the infrastructure side will become more and more less of a problem to them. And you can see it like all around the world, like, Starlink is going to make it available, like internet 10 or 100 Mbps to every corner of this world. So there's so many efforts to make internet not just accessible, but also cheap to them. Secondly is the adoption to savings component or topping up the wallet. When we did our research, we found out that after the pandemic, March of last year today, adoption to mobile wallets has increased significantly than the way they used to, open a bank account where they need to fill out forms in a branch where it really intimidates them. But now You don't even need to have a minimum balance for you to have a mobile wallet, which is a huge hindrance. Like even for the domestic helpers before in Singapore, if I need to park in $600 or so, that's so much money. $600 is a lot for the average Filipina. That's about 20,000 pesos or so in going rate today, and that's just so huge for them. So, and that's the reason why they did not open a bank account in the first place before. The numbers now are showing that there's greater financial inclusion, but you can still see half of them still don't have a bank account, especially in the Philippines. So we need to really understand what is really slowing them down. But I think what I'm seeing, Anna, is that the older generation are the ones that are not so open to it, but they do let their young kids open it for them, open the bank accounts for them. So I guess the role of the children is also a huge factor in teaching them and making them more open to digital wallets.
But you see, hence lies the challenge. Sorry to throw a spanner in the works.
Sure.
Hence lies the challenge. All this innovation, the digital tools and it is improving the inclusion. It's improving the access to financial capability. Is it also making them financially capable? That is $1 million question.
Correct.
And I am still not fully convinced that all of this is actually going to make people more financially capable. Yes, they will have access to it. Yes, somebody else will be controlling their wallet and telling them when they're going over budget and when they're under budget and when they're likely to tip over. Is it not taking away that decision-making power that should sit with them in the first place? And that's where my biggest concern is. We have already seen the impact of non-engagement, disengagement, whatever, with money of the young generation. And we've seen that they do not feel any relationship. There is no attachment. There's no bond, right? It is a plastic. It is something which is there, right? And if we take this one more step further and take away all of the financial decision-making power from them through some of these tools, I'm not saying all of them, but through some of these tools, are we actually really, in real term, improving their financial capability, or are we making their life convenient that somebody else can actually do that for them? They don't have to worry about it.
That's a very good question there. And Pushpa, mind you, I think in our end, we've been scratching our heads, thinking of testing. We always test new ideas. In fact, we got in an accelerator program by UNICEF, all because we proposed an idea where we're able to help build functions within our wallet that helps the parent budget where the remittances would go in the family and be able to communicate using the wallet and teach financial literacy tools. Before, we wanted to even offer aspects such as access to ethical credit and whatnot. But then if you look at it from a bigger picture, a lot of them are not, because they're not financially literate, they would take out loans from loan sharks, and it would be a never-ending cycle for them that they aren't able to pay for it. So we decided on our end that we aren't even thinking about offering ethical loans, because in the first place, if they're good at managing and dealing with their money, they wouldn't even need to take out the loans. So on our end, we're approaching it more on a very basic level, and slowly impart the tools and the ability for them to see that they're more than capable of making money grow for them. But we probably have to do it in very small stages. And in our end, a digital wallet also is very different from digital banking. Like the licenses are different. It's too expensive to even venture into digital banking, but we are actually looking into partnering with some of the financial institutions to reimagine the way they offer the products, so that at the very simple terms, like they have to create products that are more suitable to this demographic, as opposed to like a one size fits all. Because the way migrant workers work is like, if you teach them even in small amounts, I think that would be better than, having a minimum maintaining balance and when the money is parked for so long.
Yeah, I'm not questioning your product by any means. I'm just making you conscious. But if we look at it, three of us from three different areas, we have a huge potential to actually influence this.
Correct.
A is to the future of financial capability, education and training, but more importantly, we have a huge potential based on our research and the data that we collect, is to influence our policy making, right? Because that's where it sits. Like in New Zealand, we're doing a lot of work on hardship. All right. So we have a new law that has come into effect, that all the lenders now need to be very, very cautious and careful and test whether the person they're actually lending money to is capable of paying that back. Because a lot of and you would have seen that in your work in Philippines, and I'm sure in Singapore too, that people go and borrow money because they need it now. Right. And they may not be able to pay it back, so they go further into hardship. Yeah, it's those kind of things. So the more data that you collect and the more information you have, we can influence in our respective countries that what the government also needs to do. Financial capability is only one little cog for financial well-being. Right, there are financial institutions that they need to play their role, right? Individuals need to play their role, and the private sector, the finance sector also needs to play their role. So if we think that we will, by teaching people about managing their money better, we will solve the issue of financial capability, we're kidding ourselves. All right, that is not realistic. The whole circle, all of these different players actually need to come together. The legislation has to play its role. The product and services have to play their role. The decision makers need to come on board. The educators, the researchers, we all need to actually come together instead of working in isolation in our areas, which I've been watching for last 25 years. Everybody, each in their own sector, is very pleased we've done this. But what is the impact overall? And that's where I think our national strategy is. That's one of the things we're looking at, is how do we work together as a group, as a whole, to make sure that we are all moving in the right direction, rather than each one is moving in their own direction.
Correct.
This is a really great point, Pushpa, and actually a really, I think, good note for us to finish on when thinking about there's a role of individuals, but there's also roles of government, financial institutions, private organizations, etc. And Audrey, I might just find out if you've got any final comments to add on anything that's been discussed in those kind of last two topics.
I've always been very inspired by Dr. Pushpa. So I think her last comments are very, very apt for all of us in the space to really collaborate. And thanks to Mariko and her work at Move 78 that's brought us together again, I feel like there is a need for more intentional collaboration. So Dr. Pushpa is completely spot on. We're operating in silos. And something that we've learned is that, in our work, it's all about being in support and in educating the person, as opposed to teaching the subject. So if we put the people at the center, and something I learned from my Maori friends, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata, which means the people, that would be a great guiding North Star for us in this space.
agree.
I think that's an amazing note to finish on. So Mariko, I might hand back over to you. Thanks very much to Albert, Audrey and Pushpa. I've really enjoyed this and learned a lot as always. So thanks so much for this.
And thank you, Anna, for your great work, keeping us all on
My
track.
pleasure. I do what I can.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much to all the attendees, and thank you to all our fabulous guests today. This was a tremendous discussion. Obviously, it was just the tip of the iceberg, but I think is helping to educate everybody as to the magnitude of this issue and how we all need to work together. And that's what the APAC Financial Wellness Initiative is all about. So we are so glad to have you join us today. And we look forward to further collaborations with you all. So thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.